Well, good morning, everybody. I know there'll be folks still kind of hopping on a little bit over the next few minutes, but we'll get started. It's good to see you all. It's good to have you all with us. So you are, in case you're wondering where you hopped into, you're in the April Connect OC Coalition meeting. We're happy to have you. My name is David Pattinson. I'm the project coordinator for Connect OC with Partners for Wellness. Partners for Wellness is the umbrella organization, and Connect OC is a program of Partners for Wellness. We're funded by the OC Healthcare Agency, Mental Health and Recovery Services, Office of Suicide Prevention, and Mental Health Services Act, Prop 63. So that's where we're coming to you from. I want to also introduce to you, and we're going to keep it a little short today and just introduce by name, so we can have a little extra space to introduce somebody new with the Connect OC Coalition. So Crystal Bleicher, as you all likely know, is our program manager. We also have Sarah Chalice, who's our health educator with Connect OC, and Vivi Vu, who is also a health educator with Connect OC. And then I'm going to give her a little opportunity to introduce herself in greater detail. But I'm happy to introduce to you all for the first time Camila Haro, who is our new health educator intern. You all may remember Joy. Joy has moved on to equally exciting things. We won't say new and better, but equally exciting things. And we're really excited now to have Camila join us. So Camila, if you would mind introducing yourself a little bit more.
Hello, good morning. Thank you for that great introduction. My name is Camila Haro, and I'm a health educator intern at Connect OC. I am a UCI student. I am a psych major and education major, and I am a fourth year, and I'm really excited to be here. Thank you.
We're really excited to have Camila on. And of course, you all will be seeing a lot more of her and some of the work she's doing as over the next few months and for a while on from there. So hopping into kind of what we're doing today. So as you all will have seen in the email or in the newsletter earlier in March, April is National Minority Health Month. And so we wanted to take some time to focus in on that. And I had some really good conversations with one of our panelists, actually with each of our panelists, but with one in particular, Alicia and Needham, who I'll introduce a little bit more in a minute, about kind of what would be a valuable angle to go with this conversation. And we really got into a conversation about the nature of bias and the impact of bias. And of course, for us, as we are with the Connect OC Coalition, focused on helping youth and young adults here in Orange County gain better access or become more aware of the mental health resources that are available to them. You're really thinking about this in the context of the mental health impacts of bias. And that's bias both for an individual, right? So an individual experience bias and the impact on their mental health, as well as the impact it has on their loved ones. But also the community level impact of bias, both when individuals experience bias, as well as the communities are experience the consequences of bias. And so we're going to look at that through a more general lens, kind of what is bias and how can we think about that, and how can we have better conversations about that and be better informed about it, but also what are the mental health impacts and what can we do as people, both as youth and young adults, what can we do for ourselves and for our peers, but also as people who support youth and young adults in their mental health journeys, what can we do around this issue of bias to help better facilitate better mental health and wellness for those individuals and those communities. So I'm going to introduce by name each of our panelists, and then I'll invite them to introduce themselves a little bit more detail. So Alicia, we'll start with you. Alicia is coming to us from the G.R.E.E.N Foundation.
Thank you, David. Hi, everyone. I'm a community engagement advocate with the G.R.E.E.N Foundation. I've been in that role for 4 years now. And so, yeah, I do a lot in the social justice and advocacy part of that, where we work with young adults on leadership development training, as well as responding to hate crimes through care navigation. We also have a breast health support program for women undergoing breast cancer treatment. We do outreach and education. We have a lot of educational workshops. And then through outreach, we're serving people through food banks, different community events, just out in the community handing out resources. So thank you all so much for having me here. And I'm very excited to do this topic. Thanks.
Thanks, Alicia. And then Dawn, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
Thank you, David. Good morning, everyone. My name is Don Han from the Orange County Human Relations. I use gender pronoun he, him, and his. So I've been in this role, been with the Orange County Human Relations for the last 22 years. Our agency have a vision that we believe all the people should have the right to live free from discrimination and violence. Those two key terms, discrimination and violence, is the core work of what we do here in Orange County in the last 30+ years. Responding to hate crimes, hate crime preventions, diversity, equity, inclusion type of work and training, and providing conflict resolutions for the county in courts and in the community. And last but not least, we are providing community engagement type of services to the county. Thanks for having me.
Great. Thanks, Don. And actually really quick, just a quick note, because I see a few folks, they're more with the program than I am. First off, welcome to everybody who's attending the meeting. We'd love to have you introduce yourself in the chat, who you are, if you're with an organization, what organization you're with, and any other information you'd like to include, just so that folks have the opportunity of seeing a little bit more who's in the room and getting to know each other a little bit more. So I saw Yasmin already share, so thanks for reminding me and getting me a little bit more on my P's and Q's. And then, of course, last but absolutely not least, Nikki, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself a little bit.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you all for being here. My name is Nikki Uwe. I am the program supervisor at one of the Orange County Asian and Pacific Islander Community Alliance, also known as OCAPCIA's mental health programs. We are an organization here in Orange County that is dedicated to enhancing the health, social, and economic well-beings of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. But because we do live in communities that are obviously integrated and have plenty of other identities within them, we service really all people because we see that as part of the mission of making our lives better, even within only our communities. And so we have a lot of different departments. We have homelessness prevention, we have physical health and COVID response. We have 3 different mental health departments and growing. We have, let me see, small business loans and a policy and advocacy team that does a lot here in Orange County. So it's good to see all of you, and hopefully this is a great discussion.
That's great. Thanks, Nikki. Thanks, Don, Alicia. Our first point of discussion was going to be, and I think you all are already on top of things, just kind of a little bit more about the work of the organizations you represent, G.R.E.E.N Foundation, OCAPCIA, OC Human Relations. So maybe I'll just open up if there's anything else that you all would like to add about the work of the organization you're with, please feel free.
I just wanted to add the G.R.E.E.N Foundation has been working with OC Human Relations on their Hate Hurts Us All campaign. So we started that in December, I believe, 2021, the planning. And then the full launch came, I believe, in June of last year. And so since then, it's been through care navigation, specifically in the African-American Black community for our organization, but of course, helping, as Nikki said, anyone that comes to us. Helping them identify resources if they've been a victim of a hate crime or a hate incident, and helping them navigate that process. So that's some of our other work that we do, also with 211OC as well.
Yeah, adding in a very similar vein, OCAPCIA is the regional lead of the statewide Stop the Hate initiative. So we oversee many different organizations here in Orange County, as well as the Inland Empire, in our efforts to do victims assistance and hate prevention work. So we also do some therapy and victim navigation with anyone who has experienced any sort of hate incident, not just limited to racial discrimination, but also encompassing gendered violence, homophobia and trans violence, all things that really fall within that big umbrella of hate.
So as Alicia and Nikki said, well, there's a lot of different organizations that have been doing these hate preventions or responding to hate and hate crimes in Orange County. We're one of the very few agency or county that actually respond to hate incidents, and I'll get into a definition of the difference between hate crime and hate incidents later on in the questions. So many of us probably familiar with the rise of anti-Asian hate. So that also sparked legislation, some funding coming from the federal and from the state. Here in Orange County, our Board of Supervisors actually have expanded some budget to support our work in human relations, in hate preventions and response. And they expand the work by $1 million into the budget, where we are able to partnership with organizations like the G.R.E.E.N Foundations, Korean Resources Center, LGBTQ Center. Now I'm gonna get in trouble not remembering all the name. Alicia, help me if I forget someone. Access California. There's one more organization I forget. And now the expansion is to include the 7 threshold languages.
I think it was the Jewish Federation.
Oh yes, so the Jewish Federation of Orange County, and there are 2 organizations that are involved with this expansion that we partnership with that are not threshold languages, right? And that is the G.R.E.E.N Foundations and the LGBTQ Center. For the reason is that, and the Jewish Federation, in the last 30 years plus that we've been tracking and collecting data for the county and providing the county with the support and written report for Orange County Hate Crime Report, we know that the top 3 targeted community in Orange County always been African American community, the Jewish community, and the LGBTQ IA plus community. So with that being said, it's very intentional for us to make sure that that partnership happen so that people have access to resources.
Thank you, each of you. Thank you, Don, too, for bringing in some of that information there in terms of the fact that OC Human Relations has been tracking kind of the facts and figures on hate incidents in the county, and that information is really valuable in terms of a foundation for the conversation. Right? It's important on one level to make sure that we're listening to people and trusting them in their stories and trusting them in their experiences. But it's also helpful for people to get a scope of what's happening, right? Kind of thing. And some of that information really helps us do that in a meaningful way. So thank you, each of you, for expanding a little bit. So maybe we'll start with kind of laying a foundation for what it is we're talking about when we're talking about bias. And Alicia, I want to invite you to respond first, but what do we mean by bias?
Yeah, we all have bias. We all have a certain inclination towards a certain thought, a certain a certain belief that we may have, because it encompasses all of those things. Some biases that we may have are unconscious, to where we don't know about them. That is our implicit bias. That is bias that we might have picked up from our family. We might have picked that up from friends. We might have picked that up from TV and what we saw out there. And it's something that, unless you check yourself, you don't realize, but it's a first natural thought that comes up that may be judgmental, or I shouldn't, maybe better closed-minded, and not seeing things from every angle. And then additionally have explicit bias, which is something that you are more aware of. You like Cheetos instead of Doritos, something like that. You know about it. And I'm a Cheetos fan. But yeah, so those are the 2 different aspects of it. And really the way of uncovering that and starting to realize, like, what are the certain, you can start very on the surface level of your likes and dislikes, or certain views and things, but definitely exploring on issues that matter to you, and thinking, what is a different way that I could think about this? Am I only listening or watching things that are supporting my belief? Am I doing that confirmation bias and only seeking those things out? Or am I going deeper and thinking, what are the people on the whole other side thinking and how do they feel? And how can I try and understand that? It's a big thing. So,
Mm.
yeah.
Thank you, Alicia. I really appreciate it. And it sounds like a good place to start is with some curiosity. I love the way you phrase that. What are some other ways I can think about this subject, this person, this issue, this circumstance, whatever it might be? Which is like, it's an invitation, but it's also not as threatening as it sometimes seems. It's just what is for something. Sometimes folks to think outside of what's familiar to them feels threatening, but it's simply a thought experiment at the beginning. How can I think differently about this? Or what are some other ways to think about it? Create some empathy.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. And to kind of to start there, and if something's bothering you or you're having even like a conflict with someone as well, that's another opportunity to try and see, okay, what potentially am I not seeing here? How can I extend that compassion as well and try and meet them where they're at and try and resolve it that way. And I think those are good tools to have when you're trying to start this work, and kind of expand yourself.
Mm.
But I'll yield
No,
my
that's
time
good.
so everyone else.
No, that's great. That's a good follow-up. Yeah, Don, Nikki, anything to add to that as we're building our concept of what bias is?
I think when people hear the word bias or implicit bias, oftentimes we get confusion for not prejudice. I don't have that attitude or discriminatory thinking or thought in my head. It's way far from that. I know that when we are asked to do implicit bias training or community or even in education or to educator, sometimes folks come into the space or the workshop kind of have resistant per se because of misunderstanding what bias mean or implicit bias mean. So it's always good to start, like Alicia said, with self and reflection of when do I check my own biases, especially when we were doing decision making or engagement and things like that.
Yeah, I just want to add, I think similarly to what Dawn was saying with misconceptions about bias, when we think of bias, we also tend to think of big social categories, right? We think of racism, we think of gender, but in mental health in particular, but all fields of social service, bias also runs a lot deeper in, do we have bias against homeless folks? Do we have bias against certain weight classes, certain appearances even, and aesthetics? And that can play a really big role in disparities in diagnosis by providers. And so I think when we think of bias, it's also challenging ourselves to do it on a consistent basis to reevaluate our bias, because it really does change as we get older. Our biases are never the same, and that is because we're always surrounding ourselves with different people, growing and learning. And so I think the word bias can be a little bit scary oftentimes for providers because of that, I'm not prejudiced, I'm not discriminatory, but it really is a helpful process to think about bias. As well as thinking about who you have positive bias for, because sometimes that actually can help in knowing who it's best to serve. It's not only helpful in knowing who you shouldn't serve and who you have to do a training for, but it's also helpful knowing who you're best suited to helping in the community.
I'm appreciating something that it seems I'm hearing too is that there's this tendency when you all have been working with folks, when they hear the term bias among some, that there's almost a bias against bias. The second they hear the word, that there's kind of a cognitive shutdown and an emotional shutdown because they've got a bias against the idea of bias and what that might mean for them to hold a bias. But I appreciate, Alicia, you mentioned we all have biases, right? And it's more about becoming more aware of them, becoming more curious about what's happening inside us, and being more open to new possibilities and new experiences and new ideas, at least on an internal level, which strikes me as something that is really important we do when we're doing mental health work. Something we're doing with folks all the time is helping them become more aware of what's happening inside them, becoming more curious about it, and thinking of new or exploring new ways of relating to that, either that internal dynamic or the external factors that are influencing that internal dynamic in some way.
And Nikki, too, I also want to say, I like how you said about the positive bias. And as far as understanding, accepting, and knowing, who you're best suited to serve, because I think that definitely plays a role in building that trust with who you're serving as well, where they feel they can relate to you, they can identify with you. And some of that comes from having similar experience. And some of that can be a racial thing. It can be, suiting someone who looks just like you and having that safe space, that safe connection with those people. But that could also be someone who has similar experiences as well. So I really appreciate what you said with that, and I like that. So I think that's also something to think about as well.
Brings up a question for me. It's not something I think that we ended up with the original on the question sheet. So I apologize if I'm putting anybody on the spot, but it touches on something I think for us as providers to think about. There's been this movement over really even the last 5 to 10 years away from terms like cultural competence towards things like cultural humility. And I don't know if anybody has any thoughts about why, in this context, what we're kind of talking about here, why that's important or why that shift in framework is valuable.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Dad.
No, I thought Nikki was talking, but she's muted. If not, I could share a thought. When you say competency, what have meaning, right? It's the same concept of like, looking at bias and how do we see it. When you said competency, it's kind of building a barrier for folks that may not feel that they fully understand certain culture, per se. Maybe cultural humility allow us to explore and have a room for us to grow and learn. When you throw a big word like competency or things like that, sometimes it hinder or building block or make a barrier for people to like, I'm not competent, so I'm not going to talk about it or explore that topic. So it changed the narrative of how we enter the conversation as well.
It's a really interesting angle, Don, because it's kind of almost a flip of how I've been thinking about it in general. And it's the sense of, for those who maybe looked at cultural competence, the idea of cultural competence with some, should we say, trepidation, right? The sense of like, I'm not sure that I can really become competent and that I am confident. So I lack the confidence to move forward and engage the people represented by this cultural group or this group, because I don't think I'm competent, right? So instead, it's like I can approach with this openness to learn and say, well, I can do that. Yeah, that makes sense for me. And maybe encourages people to move forward, whereas previously maybe they felt a little stuck or frozen. Yeah. Alicia, Nikki, I don't know if you have any further thoughts.
I know, Alicia, you unmuted before. If you want to respond first.
Okay, I was giving you time. I wasn't sure. I can go just shortly. I definitely agree a lot with what Don said. I honestly think they kind of play even hand in hand even when you were just talking, David, what you're saying of having that humbleness, that humility to accept that there's always more to learn, especially from people who look differently than I do. And going and immersing yourself in those spaces. And we're so grateful and lucky in this place, especially in Southern California, to have many opportunities to do that, all throughout the year. And additionally, I wanted to add the Green Foundation. That has always been our thing. We're unabashedly who we are. We celebrate our culture, bring that to our spaces, whether it's online, in person. And we always invite, we work a lot with young adults, college students from different local colleges, and a lot of them aren't Black, African American, but we still are teaching them about our culture, and teaching them about health issues that exist for people of Black and African American community, and things that we specifically face as far as certain cancers and certain higher risks of other higher risk and critical it's not coming to me. I hope you all understand what I'm saying. But we're certainly teaching those things all throughout our presentations, all throughout our trainings, because it is important to learn, that, and we're not going to shame you or to make it a point that you're an other. No, you're welcome here. You're welcome in this space. And if that's not there, bring that to that place, bring that openness, and bring that community, bring that heart to those places as well. And it definitely will bind and make you feel, accepted if you're kind of worried and kind of scared of going into a place where you may be the other one. You bring that and it'll come back to you for sure.
I'm glad I let you go first because I'm definitely shifting. I agree with everything they said, but I also think from a provider standpoint, the idea of cultural humility means taking a step back and empowering the patient or the client or whatever that interaction may entail. And I think that's really the power of the shift to cultural humility, is recognizing, like Dawn had said, that you don't have to be competent, you don't have to have all of that, but also being able to go into that interaction, knowing that you can and have to be humble about giving them the power to own what that experience looks like with you. Because I think something that can also happen with cultural competency is we accidentally create a monolith of what the experiences of a certain group are, right? And so we think, oh, every Asian patient that I get is going to have this experience. And that's not the reality. Oftentimes, especially when we look at different classes in terms of economics, different gendered experiences, different all of that, we need to let them have that kind of ownership of that that narrative and that trauma that is associated with it. And so I think that's really the power of cultural humility, is giving that to the client. And I also, in OCAPCIA, we also use the framework of cultural responsiveness too, which I think comes from the field of education, my true passion. But it's really about not only being culturally humble, but also in turn, when we start doing diagnosis, when we start doing intervention, making sure that we can be responsive to that patient's specific needs based on aspects of their culture. And sometimes that means having to be really creative with how we are doing that intervention work. And so I think cultural humility and cultural responsiveness have to go hand in hand, because you can be humble, but if you're applying the same cookie cutter things to all of your clients, it doesn't really make that much of a difference.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, thank you for that, Nikki. I think even in terms of like that hit me personally as a provider, in terms of, when I'm working with a client, right? There's this general sense, certainly among mental health providers, that you may have a certain knowledge or skill set or education as a provider, but you are not the expert on your client's life. They are, and you need to be able to give them space to be the expert, and even encourage them in their expertise on their own life, to help them take some, to feel empowered in terms of being the expert on their life. And if that's true in general for our clients, we need to keep that in mind in terms of when we're working with folks who may be in various ways different than us, because all of our clients ultimately are different than us, but in the ways that we're talking about, to recognize that not only do I allow them to be the expert on their personal experience, but also what is going to work for you, what's going to be meaningful, what's going to resonate, what is going to be experienced as responsive for you when I'm providing, when I'm supporting, when I'm encouraging that person in their experience and as they're moving towards health and healing. Especially since we're the kind of background behind all of this, that really struck me. The background behind this conversation is it being National Minority Health Month, but this is so crucial. We're talking about healthcare, including mental health care. That care is not just the singular, oh, you've got this condition, we apply this technique or this approach or this intervention, and that should resolve your issue. We need to be sure that we're presenting, speaking, directly, interacting in a way that's meaningful on multiple levels, including being culturally responsive. Thank you all. I think we're starting to really have a good foundation here. Since we're still talking about kind of the general question, or we were talking about the general question of kind of what is bias, I did want to touch on something that a couple of folks mentioned just at a quick reference level. What is a hate incident? What is a hate crime? And why is this distinction important? And Don, I'd like to invite you to kind of respond first.
Sure, thank you so much for that. So by the state legislation definition, a hate crime, first it had to be a crime, right? It's a crime against a person or a group of people or even the property that is motivated by the victim real or perceived protected social group identity, such as gender, race, ethnicity, national origin, religion, sexual orientation, disability. And the hate incidents is a behavior that is motivated by a bias toward and or hate of a person, real or perceived protected social identity as well. An incident is protected by our First Amendment. So if someone is harassing you or harassing the community, lately we see a trend is text messaging, a racial slur, or things like that. That is a freedom of speech and expression, and it's not a crime. So if that is escalated to a threat, for example, that is a crime, because threatening someone is a crime, assaulting someone is a crime, vandalizing individuals or community property is a crime. So those are the distinction between a crime and an incident. Alicia, Nikki, anything you want to add?
I think the only thing that I can add is I really appreciate the angle of also reporting hate incidents, because for many of our communities, the idea of reporting a crime is terrifying, and therefore the incidents don't get reported, or the crimes don't get reported. And so the framing is a bit more approachable. I can speak specifically for the AAPI community. We're seeing a lot more hate incidences than hate crimes. And so it's really important for us to note those.
Is it right to say then that some hate incidents rise to level in the legal framework of a crime, but not all, right? We can have a hate incident that technically wasn't a crime, but it still is an encounter that was motivated at some level by hate.
Yeah. That is so true, Nikki and David, because when, for example, when you get report, like this morning, open up my email, I got a report from one of our PD here in Orange County. It started with a hate incident. So individual was at 7-Eleven with their young daughter, and the perpetrator actually approached the individual in the parking lot, said, go back to Mexico. And then the person's like, wow, I'm going to continue, I don't want to be engaged. The perpetrator continued to follow the individual and said, go back to Santa Ana, go back to Mexico. And of course, they have their young daughter with them, so they try to avoid the confrontation. Then got in the car and tried to leave. The perpetrator block their car with another with their car, bring out a baseball bat and threaten the person. Now it become a crime, and continue to chase the person in the car to so the person pull into a sport park complex to get help, but the PD showed up and arrest the perpetrator. Now it's a crime. Sometimes it does escalate. But the impactful, if it's okay, I'd like to talk a little bit about the impact of hate crime and hate incident to the victim. As Nikki said, it's almost equally the same. You know, for many years, I was the responder for Orange County. What that means is like I would get a call or an email and said individual or community have been impacted and they would like support. I'll be the first to show up, aside from the law enforcement, and say, what can I do to support you? Oftentimes people said, you know, what do I do wrong and why I'm the targeted person? And either hate crime or hate incidents. And my repeated answer to folks is, you didn't do anything wrong, and I'm sorry it happened to you, but it does happen in Orange County. So the impact is very, you know, almost equal in the sense of we carry this with us. Our body remember. You know, if an incident happened to you or crime happened to individuals, it doesn't matter how long it happened and how long ago. If it happened again, your body remember. You know, I personally could say that when my family and I arrived as refugees to this country 40 years ago, being told to go back home, you know, go back to where you come from. Long and behold, 2020, after 40 something years, my brother was being told to go home. My nephew was told to go home, and we remember, our body remember. The impact is the same, and the symptom of bettering, of waiting on us is tremendous in terms of mental health. And this is one of the topics that I share when prior to COVID, I think 2017, I was invited to Sacramento to talk about, it was ACES conference, and they're talking about how to work with young people who have been impacted by hate crime and hate incidents, or you know, what are the symptom and how can educators support young people who may have experienced incidences in school. So it really, for us to really examine the mental health and the wellness of our community when a community is being impacted. I think that's one of your questions, David, is that what is the health impact of bias in our community when our community experience hate? So I'll stop there. Nikki, Alicia, please join in.
And I just want to make a quick comment on Lisa. First off, thank you for sharing both the stories you shared in your own experience and the experience of your family. But when we're talking about the mental health impact of bias, you know, a couple of things jumped out to me. One, as you kept saying, the body remembers. Right? When we talk in this language, the body remembers. We're talking about trauma, right? And the mental health impact of trauma, right? And even when you were mentioning the story you shared about when you used to go out and be that first responder, people would respond with, "What did I do wrong?" Even though from an outside perspective, we're aware that person did nothing wrong. They were not the perpetrator. They were not guilty, but there's internalized guilt there. Another sign of trauma, right? What did I do to deserve what happened to me, right? And so to start with, when we're talking about the mental health impact of bias, we're talking about it, among other things, in the context of trauma, the experience of trauma and the impact of trauma, both on an individual level and on a communal level. Thank you for that, Don. And yeah, of course, Alicia, Nikki, whatever you might have to add as well.
Yeah, I certainly think of the body keeps the score. Definitely think of that when you say that, Don. And I know for many of us, that is an everyday thing of encounters and microaggressions in which you're dealing with people. And for many of us, yeah, our body, it does respond to that. And if you're not taking that time, you know, in the way in which that looks for you to practice mindfulness and things like that, it'll just keep compounding and compounding, and come out in different ways because you're not dealing with it and addressing it. And you know, hopefully you don't find yourself, you know, decades later, you know, haven't worked through something like that. It's definitely, you know, being able to come to y'all as providers and get that support, get that therapy, and go through recovery. And definitely with that as well, I wanted to say too that, you know, it's so easy to get bogged down by everything that's going and happening in this world, and things like that, and really taking the time to disconnect. You know, creating spaces where, you know, we are talking about this kind of stuff and it is very heavy, but also creating spaces where there's light, where you can, you know, we can just come together and have a space where we can just hang out, you know, where we can just talk, you know, and just connect with people. Also, remembering to have those kind of interactions with people when you're working with them, and look at it as the whole context of the whole, umbrella, the everything. Um, so, and I feel like that helps, you know, with the people that I've spoken with and tried to help through this program who came to us through referrals. You know, a lot of them, it has been where it started off as a hate incident, could have been a family member, you know, a former past, partner, you know, or at a school, different things like that that have happened to them, and it starts off and it's not addressed, you know, it's not addressed with the person, or for fear they're not going to address it, right? They're scared to bring it forward, to connect with someone, to connect with law enforcement, to take that next step. So then it happens and keeps happening and happening until there is a further crime that is committed, until it's unsafe for everyone. And it's just created this whole issue. And so really taking that time, you know, to stop and to connect and to stop it from escalating. So that's kind of where my thought was going with that.
I actually thought this is like, I'm answering another one of your questions, David. But that made me think of David bringing in the context of hate incidents and hate crimes being part of trauma. Actually made me think of, there's a really fantastic training, I'm not getting paid to say this, by the National Institute for Clinical Application of Behavioral Medication. And Dr. Thema Bryant spoke about racial trauma as very distinct from other forms of trauma too. Because the reality is, when there is a trauma based on an incident, right? Oftentimes there is re-traumatization and anxiety triggers and things like that, that we work with clients through, whether that's in a clinical capacity or not. But unfortunately, when it comes to gender-based violence, when it comes to race-based violence, people are just getting traumatized multiple times, right? It happens, it's re-traumatization on a constant basis. And there are multiple points of reference for that, because we don't live in a world that is free of bias. There's one incident they can think of from their childhood, and then from a classmate, and then from your worker, maybe even from a client you may have experienced bias from. And so it's an interesting field to navigate as a healthcare provider, because avoiding triggers isn't possible when it comes to a lot of discrimination, excuse me, a lot of discrimination and the trauma that comes from discrimination. And adding to that, and kind of what Alicia mentioned as well, sorry, I mispronounced your name. Alicia mentioned as well, we live in a very digital world. And that means that we are experiencing what a lot of people call vicarious trauma or vicarious racism as well. Just seeing people that look like us, or maybe are from the same hometowns or anything like that, receiving that. And that's something that I think we're really having to rethink how we treat people for vicarious racism, because unfortunately we live in a world where it's so much easier to be impacted by seeing something because everything is recorded.
Yeah. Yeah, it stretches beyond just the individual experience to, and even just the, I know this person or this person to it, if it's in a digital space, it feels like it's everywhere, right? We're constantly being exposed to that over and over and over again, especially when that person has already an personal experience of that kind of trauma, kind of reactivation that happens. I want to, of course, I also want to do a few things. I want to be mindful of time. I never feel like we have enough time for these conversations, but I want to maybe ask two questions kind of together and then just give you all the opportunity to go ahead and respond at length as you're able and as makes sense for you. But on the one hand, I'm want to come to the question about how individuals, communities, and institutions that are supporting youth and young adults. So this is like schools, faith communities, mental health providers, healthcare professionals, the people in their neighborhoods, the broader community, as well as peers, individuals, and family members. How can we support those who've experienced incidents of hate? So that's one part of the question. The other kind of part of it is, we're talking about bias in general, and we're talking about the mental health impact and how we can facilitate healing, mental health and wellness, how we can facilitate trauma healing and these kinds of things. But there's also a sense in which bias can become a roadblock for meaningful health and mental health care. So maybe we touch on that. So maybe we could start with that. How does bias become a roadblock for mental health and meaningful health and mental health care? And what are some ways, some important things to think about in terms of addressing that in these contexts? And then we'll move into the bigger question about how individuals, communities, and other institutions supportive of young adults can help them for those who've experienced incidents of hate move towards meaningful healing. And I'll open it up to all of you, and whoever has a thought, please jump in.
I'll jump. Oh, you first.
No, you can go. You can go. Yeah.
I'll jump in really quickly about mental health, bias and roadblocks in mental health, specifically because there are so many providers on this call. I think one of the biggest things to be knowledgeable about is how much bias plays a role in diagnosis and treatment. There are studies that show that, from lower level things, quote unquote lower level, where women are diagnosed with anxiety disorders at a higher rate, to higher level and potentially dangerous things where people of color, but particularly Black individuals, are involuntarily institutionalized at much higher rates than their white counterparts. We're seeing the DSM is not free of bias. And the way that we as providers are also treating mental health crises is also not free of bias. That's really where the roadblock comes. Even when we make diagnoses, I'm not myself a therapist, but the people that I work with do. Even when we're providing treatment plans, when we're calling on certain resources as ways that we think would better the client, bias is in all of that. And that's usually where that roadblock comes from, because on a client's end, that in itself is a traumatizing process to be misdiagnosed, to feel unheard from the people that are supposed to help you. And that can lead to alienation. That just leads to further stigmatizing mental health. And I think that's something that, when we address mental health stigma, it's impossible to do it, in my opinion, without addressing bias from providers, because a lot of those stigmas, yes, they come from cultures. Yes, they come from growing up experiences, but some of those stigmas also come from negative experiences with providers as well.
I'm happy to let you go first. touch on what you were talking about. Definitely, you know, the way in which our healthcare system exists today was built on the backs of a lot of trauma, a lot of experimentation, of Black people against their rights, and so that creates already that fear of just knowing that history, of just knowing, and even having experiences within your community, within your family, of people who've been taken advantage of by the system, who fell into it. And so I think just being honest and acknowledging that is a fear, that does stop people from seeking out services. And if they should find themselves in a situation where they are there, then you're scared about being locked into something that you did not sign up for. And I think just being honest about that and realizing and letting people know you're safe, you are okay, and you're going to help them to the best of their ability. A lot of people, when I speak with them on the phone, they're like, I'm just so happy I got someone who cares. Because a lot of times when you're calling and speaking and trying to get resources, so it's just a quick hurry off the phone. I used to work at the Orange County Rescue Mission, which is a homeless shelter in Tustin, transitional housing program. And they used to tell us, we'd get calls from people doing intakes and trying to get into the program. Maybe they weren't a good fit, so we try and give them other resources, another shelter that might be better for them or their situation. And they'd always want us to hurry off the call and just be quick and then move on. At least the supervisors when I was there. And so, taking that time to be there, to sit with people, to let them know that they're safe, to let them know that you're going to help them, to let them know that it's okay to be afraid. What you're feeling is valid. And sitting there with them, so that they can open up to, the services that you are trying to provide. Because there is a lot of resistance that is there. Even people who are calling you that are still resistant about going further, who are sizing you up to see, okay, how are you really going to help me? Are you really going to say what you're doing? Or are you just going to try and, sweep past the rug and keep it moving? I'm just another number. I'm just another tally for you. I think all of that definitely plays into bias, because you definitely can build that trust with people early on by letting them know that you're there for them and you're going to help them to your fullest extent. Because people definitely feel they get lost within that system. You're going to follow up with them. You're going to stick it out with them. Of course, it depends on your program and your situation, but I think that definitely helps.
Thank you so much for that, Nikki and Alicia. I do wanted to share a little bit about, what can we do if individual or community experiencing hate incidents or hate crime. I was sharing with David that how do we talk about the term bystander versus upstander? How do we help during the incidents moment, for example? It's hard because when you experience an incident that is you being targeted because of who you are, oftentimes the individual doesn't know what to do. So this is why it's so important for us when we see it, when it's safe to do so. I'm going to repeat that, when it's safe to do so, okay? Think about your safety first. You could interrupt the situations by asking questions like, excuse me, can you explain to me why did you say that? Or why did how did this come to this point? Interruption could be, you could ask the person who are being targeted a question. Talk about, hey, what do you think about today's weather? You're just distracting the situation. The other thing what we could do is educate, because sometimes we do make mistake. People make mistake. I make mistake. I say things that I may not mean to, or for the spur of the moment. Calling people in versus calling people out, right? Because when you call folks in or anyone in, we allow room for us to grow together and learn from each other, and definitely echo folks, our own policy, our thing that we hear that we can agree with and that is productive. Okay? So oftentimes when we respond to hate crime and hate incidents, when people see that we showed up, like Alicia said, showed up and be there, be supportive, be with each other, in a sense, really providing that emotional support that they don't receive, especially through law enforcement, in the sense that law enforcement will take the case and they'll write down the cases, and that was it. They'll just leave. If you're not being harmed at the moment, oftentimes they are also being the capacity that they have is very limited. So this is when our community become an anchor for people that be able to lean on and get support, like Alicia and her team work with folks, and most importantly, continual education in any angle that we can, educate ourselves, educate other, and join other education institutions that allow us to have more accurate or more accurate information on the issue.
Yeah, I want to echo what everyone else has said as well. And thank you for your input on those. First of all, I'm having a great time. Everyone is so amazing on this panel. Second of all, I think the most powerful thing we can do in the face of hate is, it sounds so cheesy, but create love, create pride, create community. And that's really an approach that's underutilized, right? We want to focus on the trauma and the healing from trauma, but a part of that process has to be, how do we build communities that love each other enough to intervene? How do we build communities and a sense of identity pride that when hate incidents happen, we're not blaming ourselves because we recognize the power of our people. And so I think that's a really important angle that as providers, we have to always remember.
I love that, Nikki. We sometimes get so caught up in the pathologizing trauma that we forget what really the goal here is for greater connections, for a meaningful experience of community, for a meaningful experience of life, not encumbered by fear. Yeah, thank you. Alicia, I saw you were going to comment as well.
Yeah, I just had another thought too. Creating spaces, safe spaces where people can safely express themselves, and allowing it to look different than what is the norm. Creating a space where people are safe to be authentic and to be themselves. That is something I definitely see as what's seen, especially within the Black community, of things that are always a certain way, as far as we only focus on sports and music and those type of things, right? And we're only getting together through those things. What are some other spaces and opportunities where we can reach and meet even more people and bring even more people to that conversation, empowering people to show up in themselves, and exactly who they are, right? That's definitely a part of this work, because when you keep getting, you keep experiencing that trauma, keep getting hit with different things, you start to be like, I need to act a certain way to be accepted. I need to dim my light and dim who I am so that others can, so I can fit in. So and we all do that to a certain extent, but allowing people, especially when we're working with people that, you can show up, you can be yourself, and don't let this experience limit that going forward, and kind of work with people in a way of how can you do this in regards to your specific situation.
Alicia, I want to maybe follow up with that with something, and we'll kind of maybe move towards wrapping up with this, but in our conversation, you had mentioned, our earlier conversation, you talked about the importance of empathy and non-judgment in addressing bias. Can you talk a little bit about that as well, maybe expand a little bit on that? Yeah,
I know Nikki also brought that up as well. I even joke with David, we were talking about it. It sounds, this is all stuff that we do learn about when we're young, when we're kids, we kind of forget about it. We kind of stop being so open and showing that love to people through our different experiences. And so I think a lot of that does start with your own mental health, your own time, always making that commitment to improve yourself and those type of things. And when you are hit with, you know, a situation where your bias comes up to you and suddenly you're aware of it, or you're acting a certain way and not being as open-minded as you could be, take that opportunity to show that love, to show that kindness, and just allow it to grow. And even in times when you are getting hit with that hate, as well, it's as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. as he professed to proclaim, definitely understanding when a situation needs to be addressed and when you need to stand up for yourself. We're not trying to diminish that, but extending that empathy and being able to see, I understand this is where this person's at. This person may be a racist, but that's not a reflection of me. Just because they believe that doesn't mean that my worth is less or anything like that. And those are all certainly things that people you start thinking about when you're hit, you're a victim of a hate crime. Your self-worth is impacted, your self-respect, you're having doubt, all of those sorts of things. Yes, you're angry, but it's an attack, and it definitely cuts deep. And so I think definitely just responding with that love, responding with that kindness, responding with that compassion. Also, when you're working with people, I recognize the suffering that you're going through. I may not have been, I may not have gone through this exact situation, but I understand, and I'm here to help you. These services are here to help you. And it's also Dawn, maybe sometimes people just, as he mentioned, about asking about the weather, maybe sometimes people just need someone to speak with, to connect with. Not everything has to be so businessy. We could still connect and have those intimate moments with people. So, thank you.
Thank you all. As we're wrapping up, I'm hearing a few things come up quite a bit more, and I think it's interesting, right? This is the kind of antidote. If bias leads us to be separate from others in some way, right? An important antidote is community, connection, being with, understanding, empathy, love, right? Kind of when we get down to some brass tacks about what does it look like to support youth and young adults who are experiencing bias or impacted by bias in terms of their mental health journey, right? The first thing to do is to be with them, right? Be with them in their experience, the whole of it, right? The tough parts and the things that still bring them joy and excitement and the whole person. So first, thank you all for joining us. Thank you for being willing to share. I'm really appreciative of the insight that you all were able to share with us and the perspective. I'm still going to be kind of thinking through and processing some of the things we've talked about. But good news for anybody who's like, I want to hear that again. We recorded the meeting, and that'll be up on the website sometime early next week or so. But yeah, again, Alicia, Dawn, Nikki, thank you. Yes, thank you, Crystal. Crystal shared a survey in the chat. If you would take the opportunity between now or shortly after the meeting, whenever you're able to fill that out, it's a short survey. And for those who are providers, you get it, you know how it goes. This is how we know what we're doing well and what we need to improve on, or what we need to do more of. And it will also, for those of you who are not providers, that's the same story. Taking that quick survey helps us know what's going well, what we need to improve on, or what we need to do more of. And so we appreciate if you're able to do that for us. Nikki, Alicia, Dawn, anything else before we kind of wrap up this portion of the meeting? Anything else you'd like to share to the group?
The last note, sorry, Dawn, do you want to go first?
No, go ahead.
Okay. The last note I want to say is also, we as providers experience bias from our clients, from the people we service, from people who don't understand why we need the funding that we do to do the work that we need to do, right? There's a lot of ways we experience it. And so I would really encourage you to also remember to think about yourself in applying this knowledge. But thank you in general for having us. And I learned so much from you, Dawn and Alicia.
Likewise, Nikki, thank you so much, and Alicia as well. As we talk about is continue educating ourselves and about who we serve and who our clients are. Orange County have a rich history of its own diversity. It also have a very dark side of Orange County, you know. So in terms of bias, hate and hate incidents, please learn the history of how this county become the way it is, right? I always ask folks, like, you ever wondering why we only have 2% of our demographic, African-American demographic in Orange County, right? If you look at the closest city to us, the borderline city of LA County to us is Long Beach, and the other south end, which is Oceanside or San Diego County, right? If you look at those 2 counties or those 2 cities, look at the number of African-American populations. Look at the percentage. It's much higher than Orange County. Orange County only have 2% because of its history of anti-Blackness. So things like that is for us to understand, and so we can serve our clients better. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Yeah, I'll just be brief. Thank you all so much for having me. Thank you for this conversation. David, of course, for being open to doing this. I think it definitely is right on time, right? And hopefully people can walk away and use this for your work. And I definitely agree with Dawn, what you're saying as far as educating yourself. There is rich history just in Orange County, you know, and definitely learning all of these systems, how it came to be. It's actually very fascinating. When you learn about true history and things like that, it is very fascinating. Like, why didn't we get this in the schools, right? So definitely taking that time and just staying open, staying compassionate, having that empathy, you know, and starting, you know, as Nikki said, starting with yourself definitely is a great place. So I want to thank you all so much for having me. Thanks.
Thank you all. Great. Well, as we will transition into the next portion of our meeting, so that we can hopefully wrap up on time. Thank you all again for joining, both those who are listening and participating in the conversation, and also Nikki, Dawn, and Alicia for leading our conversation. So we'll move into Connect to See updates, but just a quick personal update. I wasn't with you all last month, despite originally intending to be, and I just want to share some good news. That it was because my wife and I were welcoming a baby girl into the world, Claire Joy. So yeah, I know Sarah did an amazing job leading the meeting last time, but just wanted to share with you all the fun news and then where I was and whatnot. So and then I'll pass it off to Sarah for our updates for the coalition.
Thanks, David. And also thank you to all our panelists for the amazing conversation. I just feel like I'm being hugged, and I can go outside to take on the world, and all the compassion and love that you have all shared has been so encouraging and inspiring. So thank you so much for all that. We actually have a lot of different things going on in May. You know, Mental Health Month is next month, and it's busy, busy, busy. So yeah, I just have a few things. I'm going to mention them all briefly, and then just be on the lookout for the email that we're going to send out with the summary and stuff. We'll have all the flyers and all the information again in case you miss anything that I say today. So starting off on May 1st, which is on Monday, we have our mental wellness fair with Cal State Fullerton. We're really excited about that. It's going to be some great partners that are going to be tabling with us and just being able to share some resources on campus for the Cal State Fullerton community. And then we have the Directing Change event going on that the county is putting on. It's like an award show for all the people that submitted videos to Directing Change, and some winners as well, and just kind of celebrating them and getting to see their awesome work as well. That's on May 11th. And then I don't know if US Vets is here today, but they're having a couple of events. They're having a competence and education training series, which goes on throughout the month of May, just based on veteran education, and veterans will be facilitating that. So it'll be a great opportunity to learn more about how to serve that population and that community and love them well. They're also doing, I don't know if maybe Erin might be here, but they're doing also an art workshop with Laguna Playhouse, and I'll let her talk if she is here, just more about that in a little bit. And then May 16, we have our IG Live with Camila, just talking about real talk and letting young adults have a space to speak about their personal mental health experience, hopefully to encourage and enlighten those who have also gone through similar experiences, and to hopefully inspire them to share their story as well, and to just encourage and facilitate some great conversation. And lastly, we have the COA event on May 20th, which is going to be at the San Clemente Outlets. Just kind of highlighting mental health and music, and just having a lot of different bands there. Look out on our Instagram. We're going to be posting something on there very soon just about that. So like I said, a lot of updates on our end. We want to hear what you guys are doing. So if you have an event that you want to mention or bring up, or something, an important update, please feel free to raise your hand, or you can unmute yourself.
Sarah, I did want to mention, I just put something in the chat. We had a listening and learning session, is what we call them. It's a workshop. We did have one last night, and our next one is going to be on May 11th. So that's going to be on mental health authenticity and trauma. So if you've enjoyed this discussion, definitely make sure to join us for that. We have some really great speakers, Dr. Monica Jackson, and this is really her focus and her wheelhouse. And then as well as Dr. Valerie Yerger, who will be touching on combating stress and stress management techniques. So I put the flyer in the chat.
Sweet. Thanks, Alicia. That was so cool. Yeah, we'll definitely be sharing all of your flyers as well in our email with the summary and all that good stuff. So I'll be able to share this with everyone else as well. But we will move on to Michelle.
Good morning. Thank you, panel, for such a beautiful discussion. I just wanted to invite everyone. Just Gather's doing our first fundraiser. It's May 25th. It's Thursday evening, and we're keeping it really low cost, actually less than our actual cost, because we want to introduce everyone to what we're doing at Just Gather Wellness with Nature, and we're partnering with the Soul Institute and their neuroscience, and it's really exciting. So if anyone wants to come, our student early bird is only $99, and if that's too much, I can try to find someone to sponsor you, because we're all in this together with mental wellness, and we'd love to have you there. And thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Michelle. That sounds like an amazing event. Yeah, I will go on to Jessica.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jessica, and I'm with Big Brothers Big Sisters. First of all, just thank you for really the space this morning. I think my biggest thing was like, yes, there is bias about even having bias, and as providers, like, it is a part of what we do every day. So thank you for that. So at Big Brothers Big Sisters, we offer mentorship services to children 6 to 16. We will be having a food distribution coming up on May 10th, where we usually go ahead and also table our event. So if you have any families that you think their children would benefit from a mentor, please send them over. We can use the food as a come get food, but they'll also get knowledge about our program and hear from our own families all the benefits of being in it. So thank you so much. And I dropped everything in the chat.
Awesome. Thanks, Jessica. We'll move on to Nikki.
Hi, everyone. I threw it in the chat, but OCAPCIA is actually kicking off Mental Health Awareness Month with 2 things. One is we're hosting a wellness festival next Saturday. If any of your organizations want to booth, we actually still have tabling room. So please connect with me. My email is noei@ocapcica.org. And we also are, for the next 2 years, going to provide some stipended trainings for community members to learn about mental health topics. One of our first ones is in the flyer here, a space for saving face. You're all welcome to join or share with community members as needed. This training will be in English, but we are hosting trainings in Vietnamese and Korean later this year as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Nikki. Amanda.
Thanks, Sarah. Hello, everyone. I shared all our flyers in the chat, but we have a couple of fun things coming up for Mental Health Awareness Month. We are bringing back our homework half times. These are for our students to encourage them to take breaks, try some self-care while they're, high stress with studying. They're every Monday and Wednesday throughout May at 5 p.m. The majority will be on Instagram Live. So we've got a lot of fun activities, a lot of art, a lot of music. We've got a decluttering specialist who will talk about not only like keeping a nice clear space, but also decluttering and closing those tabs in your brain. I'm taking lots of notes for that one. And then we do have one that's going to be in person. We're going to do a journaling session at a local coffee shop in Costa Mesa, Coffee Nature. So that'll be a lot of fun. Everyone will get journaling packets and we'll journal together in their flow space. Then on May 6th, we have our Fun in the Sun Festival. That's going to be at Orange Thorpe Elementary School. This one is open to all ages, so all families can attend. We've got carnival games, music, fun snacks, photo booths, and also a mental health resource fair. So come check it out and hang out with us for the day. And then on May 12th, this is once again for our teens and young adults, so in that Tay age, and we're doing a silent disco. This is going to be in Anaheim. We've got 3 student DJs who are going to be playing a variety of music, but also a lot of throwback to Y2K. So a lot of those hits, which I'm excited for, and it'll be fun. We've got games, snacks, and once again, mental health resource fair for our students. So flyers are there and they're signed up on our Eventbrite page. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Amanda. Yasmin.
Hi, my name is Yasmin. This is my first meeting. I just joined MECA, and I wanted to say that if anybody ever wants to collaborate even after May, because I know it's such a busy month, please, I would love to keep programs going throughout the year and connect with everyone. So, and especially if anyone's interested in Muslim mental health or the South Asian community or refugees, that's something that I think there's a need for as well.
Thank you so much. Christina.
Hi, everyone. Christina with Phoenix House. For Mental Health Awareness Month, Phoenix House will be hosting a health resource fair for children and families. So there's going to be resources for the parents, and then we're providing lots of free activities for the kids. It'll be from 11 to 2 on Saturday, May 13th at the Santa Ana Zoo. Little incentive, the first 500 guests get to go to the zoo for free. I'm going to throw the information into the chat. I am technologically challenged. I haven't been able to figure out how to throw the flyer in there, but the information's all there in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. And Susan.
Hi, everyone. This is my first meeting as well. I just wanted to say I learned so much, and I am really excited to continue to be on these calls to learn even more. So thank you, everyone who shared. I am brand new to Uplift Yoga Foundation. We are an organization that focuses on teen health through mindfulness and movement and peer connection. And in honor of Mental Health Awareness Month, we are going to be having an event on May 21st. It was supposed to be live in person on May 20th, but unfortunately things fell through. And so now we'll be online on the 21st. I put the information in the chat. It is an actual, our teens will be participating and actually showing you what our programs are. It's a beautiful experience. So I hope you can join, and please share with your friends and family. I look forward to seeing you next month.
Thank you, Susan. And Cameron?
Hi, everyone. First of all, I want to thank everyone for their incredible speech, and especially about how the body remembers trauma. I was introduced to all of you guys through Michelle, who's an incredible leader with Just Gather. And I met her and know her because we've created a device called Shift that targets the body remembering. So in 25 minutes, this device, which is in the form of a hat, is able to reduce anxiety and chronic pain in people in 25 minutes. And it started with my sister, who had a Guillain-Barré syndrome incident, and her body remembered the trauma of the hospital visit, remembered the anxiety of it, and it built over the years. And so now, you know, we have a focus on, now that we've done clinical studies, nonprofits who work with especially young kids who suffer from chronic pain or anxiety. And so, you know, we offer these devices and units for free for a lot of nonprofits who are working with those populations of people to hopefully help reduce it in a non-invasive, safe, and rapid way. And so I think my email was put in the chat, but we're really just, you know, looking for groups and nonprofits that we can help, because we won't make anything off of this, but you know, it started with just trying to help my sister, and we hope we can help more people like her. So I'll definitely put my email again in the chat.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And does anyone else have any updates for us before we hop off? No? Okay, sweet. Well, if you haven't gotten the opportunity yet, please take our survey. Crystal posted it in the chat a couple times. So if you haven't taken that, please do that. It helps us to improve these meetings and to hear from you all just about how we can improve and maybe some cool new ideas that we can incorporate into future meetings as well. Our next meeting will be May 26th at 10 a.m. And we look forward to seeing you all then. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your week or rest of your Friday and your great weekend. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.